Before I embark upon commenting on the report, I would like to add just a few general comments on the perspective that was risen in the previous session. And one point of departure, are things getting worse or are things getting better? And it's easy to find a lot of things to worry about, and there are many things to worry about. But basically, we also experience in the world that more and more people get access to energy, get access to sustainable economic and social development. And this is maybe one of the greatest achievements in our time, lifting literally hundreds of billions of people out of poverty, giving them the same access to development and possibilities that many of us in this room has experienced. I think that is a perspective which is easy to forget in a country like Norway, especially at this point of time. We have virtually no unemployment. There's economic growth. The future are looking quite bright. But this is not the picture for many people. And from my point of view, they have the same right to development, access to energy as we have. If you look at the Norwegian history, the European history, the access to energy are closely linked to economically and social development. It goes hand in hand. If you look to Europe, I think that this point is also crucial and very important, because Europe does not only, together with Norway and the rest of the world, has to solve the problems according or connecting with emissions and climate change, but we also need sustainable growth. If you go to the southern parts of Europe, you will find a very high unemployment rate, and among youth, it could get as high as between 40% and 50% in a large economy as Spain. This is dramatic, I think, and it underlines the point that we need sustainable growth. How can we reach and get sustainable growth? Well, I'm going to get a bit back to that, but I'm quite sure that this is the one important task that European politicians need to solve together with solving the climate problems and at the same time. I think that it's quite interesting to see what is happening in the United States. Not because that they have had very big ambitions or implemented international climate treaties, but because they have been able, through technological development, to unlock resources that they 10, 15 years ago thought would be impossible to put to the markets. And how has that affected the US economy? Today we see that the emissions in the United States are heading down. They did, as far as I know, they never signed the Kyoto treatment, but they are close of achieving the goal for the United States if they had implemented the Kyoto agreement. At the same time, their economy is rebooming. Their energy industry are offering hundreds of thousands of jobs, and you see that production is moving back to the United States. And in my point of view, this is probably one of the things that is going to make the United States also in 30 years, the world's most powerful economy and country. In Europe, however, I think that the developments are a bit more worrying. There's no sign yet of a good enough development to get rid of unemployment and to offer the youth of Europe a prosperous enough future, especially in the southern parts. The Americans has made this possible by changing from coal to gas, unconventional gas resources, mainly onshore. They are getting energy independent for the first time in one generation. This has made a lot of US coal accessible on the world markets, and a lot of it is now transported to Europe and burnt in Europe, where emissions are going up in big economies like Germany and the United Kingdom. This is a very worrying development. From my point of view, I think that it's important to hold our eyes on a few facts. Number one, I think that it is extremely important to do what works first, because the road forward needs to be, we need to solve our problems with what might work in the near future, and then we will have to embark upon the ideal solutions. If you look on Europe, Europe would reach its 20-20-20 target, 20% reductions of emissions in 2020, by replacing coal with gas alone, without any subsidies. Then they would have to move forward after 2020, but it would be a big step in the right direction. And that leads me on to the next point. Because we tend to speak on fossil fuels, put all the fossil fuels in one bag and say that fossil is fossil, it's not a part of the future. Well, that's not true. Fossil energy is an important part of the future, even within the 2-degree scenario. And if you look at IEA's numbers, if you take the consumption of fossil fuels in 2035, they are on the same level as 2008, even within the 2-degree target. And then, of course, it's extremely important to ask yourself the question, how can we use the fossil fuel, the most efficient and clean fossil fuel, and use these resources as efficient and good as possible? And then I think that it's obvious that gas, for example, is a part of the solution. Per produced unit of energy, you will only have half of the emissions compared to coal. Then I think that security of supply is a theme that has not been touched upon here today. It's extremely important. I think it's a part of almost every policymaker's head. How are you going not only to have an efficient and good energy system, but also secure your supply, make sure that you're not too much dependent upon others. I think that Europe, now importing 80%, getting close to 80% of its energy consumption, needs to focus more on how you can unlock the energy potential in Europe. In my point of view, there are substantial possibilities not only in the North Sea, but also in the Arctic. And in my point of view, I think that there are potential for unconventional production in Europe, but it will probably take much longer time and be much smaller than in the United States. Mostly because that Europe is, there's much more people on a smaller place, and this is a production that demands space, but also because there's differences in legislation. In the United States, the resources are vested with the landowner, so they will get rich. In Europe and in Norway, the resources are vested with the state, and the landowners basically have no incentives for such a development. Okay. Norway as a battery for exchanging power with Europe. I believe there's a huge potential. But the idea is not new. And we have basically been doing this since the 60s. And we have, together with our neighboring countries, Sweden and Denmark, established the first well-functioning international market for energy, electricity. We are balancing out coal power in Denmark, nuclear power in Sweden, and it works very good. So basically what we now have to do is to do this at a larger scale. But there are, in my opinion, things to worry about. Hedegaard mentioned that you can now see a development where the European energy markets are getting more nationalized, and I totally agree. And this is a very worrying development if you want to introduce Norway as a capacity producer. They are not only do you have very different schemes for renewable subsidies in Europe that is basically ruining much of the dynamics that you would otherwise have in the energy markets, making them more expensive than they should be, and making the European competitiveness less than it should be. But they are now talking about introducing capacity markets, new subsidies to get new capacity, and that will basically take away the whole foundation and the whole reason for building new interconnectors. Because the reason for building an interconnector is to be a part of the capacity provider to the European energy markets. But if Europe are introducing capacity means by itself, the need for the interconnector will disappear. And this is extremely expensive infrastructure. We are planning to increase our capacity for Europe with more than 60% over the next 10 years. And it's going to be investments 40–50 billion Norwegian kroners. And of course, you won't do that kind of investments unless there's a commercial, sound economic foundation for such a decision. Then I would like to say one more thing. I think there's a huge technical potential for a development like this in Norway. And we are very lucky to have a lot of hydropower with a lot of dams and the possibility to regulate this up and down. But I also think that we just should keep in mind that increasing the exchange capacity with 10 gigawatts, which is 1/3 of the total installed capacity in Norway today, is going to be extremely challenging for environmental reasons. It means basically that we will have to run our rivers and lakes in a totally different way than we are doing today. People might be for it on an aggregated level, but trust me, if it comes near a place where you live, you don't want it anymore. Like the grid or a windmill or a power plant. I'm trying to build those things all over the country, and people basically don't want them where they live. Then I think that we are short of time. Please wrap up. Then there also needs to be heavy investments in grid to make the capacity available, not only offshore cables, but also onshore grid, and again, not very popular. Yes, we are out of time. Thank you.